I often think of life as Venn diagrams where certain things do certain things. And when you find something that overlaps many circles in the Venn diagram, for me, that's surf. So, surf is a physical pursuit. You're immersed in nature. You have a lot of still reflective time. There's a social pack at the wave. I mostly surf that I love catching up with. I'm getting my fitness in. I'm getting all it. It's just surfing ticks so many boxes that for me, it has just been a companion through all those times.
Welcome to the Growth Mavericks podcast, where we know that entrepreneurship isn't just about strategy, it's about stamina. It's about disrupting your default and getting comfortable being uncomfortable so you don't burn out before you break through. I'm your host, Adam Callinan. Let's get to work. What happens when 3 founders start 9 companies at one time? They self-fund all of them. They mortgage their homes, no outside capital. And one of those companies turns into a global brand. Well, today I'm sitting down with Andy Fallshaw. He is the co-founder and CEO of Bellroy. If you are not familiar with Bellroy, they make some of the best designed carry goods in the world. These are wallets, bags, travel accessories, and things like that. And they've done all of it without raising a dime. Andy and I get into a lot of real stuff, heavy stuff, philosophical stuff on why and how they started 9 businesses and had to kill most of them, what it took to build this global omnichannel brand from a surf town in Australia, and how they dealt with and maintained price integrity across all these marketplaces like Amazon when everyone else is racing to the bottom. We spent a lot of time talking about the craft of building something durable. His reference on why taking the stairs instead of the elevator is not just a metaphor, it's actually an operating philosophy. And Andy drops a ton of perspective on dealing with the stress of entrepreneurship and how it can either break you up, break you down, or build you up, and is a huge part of how he looks at life and operating his business at Bellroy. This is an incredible conversation with a very wise philosophical sage from Australia that has built and is operating a really incredible business. So it's a great conversation. Let's get into it.
Hello, Adam.
Hi, Andy. How are you?
Good. How are you going?
I'm doing great. So you are on the other side of the planet. I know you're in Australia. Where are you in Australia?
Yeah, just behind Bells Beach, which is southwest of Melbourne by just over an hour. And so it's known as the Surf Coast. It's the home of Quicksilver and Rip Curl and global surf brands, but it began as a tiny little fishing village and a bunch of surf bums moved in. And so it is a coastal environment. It's our smaller office. It's where our product designers are. And then our larger office is in Melbourne in the Fitzroy area. And that's Bells Beach and Fitzroy is Bellroy. So they're our 2 worlds.
Perfect. The combination. I like it. I spent some time in Australia. We actually expanded in my bottle keeper days to Australia for a number of years. And I had an office in Melbourne, which was really fun.
Well then, excellent.
Really
it's a
fun
great city.
We went to a couple of footy games. That was so fun. I mean, that's like real sport. They're just smashing each other with no pads. It's fantastic. Correct. Yeah, it was really, really fun times. How did you get into Bellroy? Where did that come from?
So I was a designer and engineer by training, but grew up in a family of wheel makers. So grew up making things, and that's big injection molding and press shops and assembly lines and all sorts. So always loved making things. And in the family company, I have multiple siblings, but I'd worked with my brother Matt and his partner Lena, who both were engineers as well. And we had really enjoyed working together, but we each sort of went our separate ways. And I designed and then ended up working for Rip Curl in Torquay, Bells Beach area, for several years, but got to a point where I just really felt like doing something a bit different that was perhaps giving back to the world a little bit more and a bit less indulgent. Matt and Lena were also thinking about a shift. They'd been doing management consulting, supply chain consulting, many areas. And so we each left great jobs and began a series of companies together. It was the theory that, 90% of startups fail. So if you start 10 of them, one should succeed. We ended up getting to 9. So we even failed at starting 10. But of those, we had a few businesses. And for me, Carryology and Bellroy, which are related. That was just always a passion. I just loved moving about the world for adventuring. I grew up loving both the mountains, and then the surf came into my life later, but I was climbing, mountain biking, skiing, surfing, doing all sorts all around the world. And I was just constantly frustrated by schlepping gear around the world. It was a constant pain and challenge, and I just always thought there might be better ways to do it. And so we began Carryology as a platform to say there might be this way to think of the world as carry goods. And it was things you use to carry your stuff. And previously, everyone was thinking more travel brands or outdoor brands or work brands. And we were like, there's sort of something you could do that unites the carry idea through all of them. I'd managed a division at Rip Curl, the equipment division, that included travel gear, board bags, wallets, accessories, all sorts of things. And so I had a bit of insight around why wallets sucked, why bags were constraining. I understood all the manufacture of them and how to do. And so convinced Matt and Lena that we should start a brand focused on this area and see if we could make something of it. And so it was, we were working on several businesses together, but it was the one that had my heart from day one.
Where does that fit in the lineup of 9?
So we had each startup we were doing, they were all self-funded. So we were doing it on the smell of an oily rag, but they were each built around something the world was missing. And so we had some software-led businesses, from truck routing to dental supplies. We had a business we'd partnered with a friend that was all around radiology and improving education in radiology. We had many others. And we'd each work around them all, but have one or two that took our major focus. So it was one of the first we began working on. Took a couple of years to sort of build out the ideas and thesis and stress test, and launch Carryology in 2009, having started all of those in 2008, and then launched Bellroy in 2010.
Amazing. So for the listener, important point there, it can take a long time to figure the things out. And it's like the combination. I mean, I bet if you go and look at all of, all those things that you started, it's like you learn something specific from each one of them that then compounds and makes the next one better and the next one better, which is eventually how you got to one that works.
Part of what you're learning is the industry. I think from outside, you always have thoughts around what's broken and what's not right. And then once you get into them, you actually discover why it's broken, and perhaps that's just the way it needs to be. But you're also learning things about yourselves. So one of the things we learned was we had very diverse skill sets between the 3 founders. And we would then also partner with some other people on some of the businesses. But one of the skills we didn't have was B2B sales. B2B sales it's different to B2C sales. So business to business, you're often selling to someone who's not the end consumer of the product. You're selling to someone who is playing a role in a business. And we actually discovered we're just much better at selling to people that are using the product themselves. It felt like a more genuine relationship. You could really understand where they see value and serve value. Where when you're in that business to business environment, you're often, Seth Godin had a post in the early years that was essentially, if you think of a hierarchy of needs in B2B businesses, the first, I'll get this slightly wrong, but it was number 1 goal is avoid risk. Number 2 goal is avoid hassle. Number 3 goal is look good, sort of thing. And that was just, it was too hard for us to orient and hustle around that style of sales, where you might need to incentivize with iPads if they, get up to a certain amount, or you might tickets to a sporting event or all these things. We just wanted to understand what a customer would value, a consumer of the good, and then really orient around that value thesis and look around that cohort. And so we discovered we were just way better at actually making things that the end consumer would value and then talking to them in a way that would help them see why this might value them.
Did you first, so if we look back in starting, going through that progression of various companies, then getting Bellroy, did you start direct to consumer or did you start trying to go B2B and then realize that you needed to go direct to consumer?
Great question. So when we look at what the consumer brand space was in sort of 2008, 2010 period, almost all the brands had been built on a wholesale first, so selling to retailers.
Really?
So we knew that would be part of it, but my brother is an incredible programmer, and one of our businesses was even software development for very complex jobs. So we already had a number of great developers in the sort of business suite. And so from day one, it wasn't called DTC back then. It was just, of course, you've got your own website and you sell through it. But we always created the stack in a way where wherever a customer was most comfortable conversing and consuming and buying, that's where we wanted to serve them. So from these days it gets called Omnichannel, but back then it wasn't. It was just, well, yeah, let's sell to retailers, but of course we'll also sell direct to consumers. And we can explore marketplaces. It's basically wherever a customer is most comfortable consuming or buying or converting, that's where we want to serve them. So from day one, it was omni-channel and it was around the world. So we actually began in slim wallets. That was, at first we thought we were going to be a bag company, but when we looked at the biggest gap in the market, it was around wallets that were optimized for the user, where previously wallets were mostly licensed off and design houses and suppliers might have designed them, but they didn't have much consumer insight in them. And we knew that doing something niche, like very slim wallets, which weren't a thing back then, we knew that was a niche audience, so we couldn't just sell to Australia. So from day one, it was global website, global retailer approaches, and global sort of consideration for where might people want to buy a niche product.
Do you think at that time, was that an Australia strategy, or was, I guess my frame of reference in the United States, when we started Bottle Keeper in 2013, which is not super far behind it, but a good 4-5 years, it was at that point in the way the consumer was consuming, there was no question that you would just go direct to consumer. Like it's like there was the infrastructure was there. We didn't need to, this was like WordPress with WooCommerce days, maybe like right before Shopify, but it was just like, it wasn't even a question. There was no reason to go straight to retail until you had some amount of consumer demand. So in Australia, do you see that is that a cultural thing that is different, or did it really change that much from like 2009, 10 to 2013, 14?
Literally those years were a massive pivot. We didn't have the DTC acronym in 2009 when we were planning it. That was invented as a sort of whole thing, and we had all of there's this new American brand that just sells pants and they just sell online, and that became this big hype model. And I think the cultural element of the Australian bit was that when you're a business born in the US, most advice is always US is the world's biggest commercial market. Just focus on that, and it simplifies your entire journey. Where our population in Australia is 20 million people, that is not a big enough market for the niche product we wanted to begin with. And so we had to be global. I think that was the Australian thing. If you build an Australia-only business, especially in that era, it sort of meant you had to make things for the masses a little bit. You couldn't go after a niche, different style of market.
Yeah.
So I think the global thing came from our Australia base. But I think the direct to consumer thing really did start to emerge 2011, 2012, 2013. That's when that whole focus came. And it was certainly US was sort of the heartland of that evolution. But, as we look back now in 2026 at one product to one market, at one sort of price point or one platform or channel, that people are starting to see the holes in that model. But when you saw what that model was at that time, you had great conversion in performance marketing on, even Instagram and Facebook, even Google Ads was a new thing we were exploring, at the launch of the business. That wasn't established. It was a new experiment. And for us, when we launched, our major focus was on PR and selling into great retailers. And it was sort of 18 months in, traction wasn't great for the first 18 months. And it was 18 months in when some of our crew were like, hey, there's this Google Ads thing. We should explore it. We've got a bunch of programmers. We can work out algorithms. We can do those things. What if we go for it? And it was an experiment 18 months in. So 2011, that's where we started to get our rocket ship traction and all those things. But when we launched it, there just wasn't this online advertising engine that we see now.
Those are the things that, I generally think there has to be luck throughout the life of a business. It happens a lot, right? There are things that are just lucky. And I commonly find that the things that are lucky, we look back at in hindsight, and they're generally timing related. Like that, you were in the place, in the position with the structure and the people and the product to take advantage of that thing when it happened. And I had the same experience. We were selling on our own website on WordPress in the summer of 2014 when Facebook launched their video ad manager. And we went rocket ship, like vertical for years. On the back of that, we were just lucky to be there when that happened.
I absolutely agree. And I think perhaps a way to think of it, this is why it's so challenging trying to be the next whatever, because whatever had their success at a certain kind of integration of things and moments and times. And I think in preparing for luck to happen, it's where you need something else guiding you. So for us, we had this focus on what is best for the customer, for the audience. Where do they want to converse? Where do they want to learn about things? What do we want to do? And it wasn't super clear, but we kept a sort of North Star orientation of what's best for the customer. And that allowed us to say, well, some people want to shop in stores, so we should be in some stores. And some people want a direct communication and relationship with the brand, so we should do that. And we sort of prepared many spots with this philosophy. And then you're exactly right. One of those things, then a series of confluences came together and bang, one of those parts took off. And then that brings everything along with it. So I think you're absolutely right. You can't wait around for luck. I've heard it as active waiting is one term that got used a long time ago. That was, how are you preparing for luck to be able to happen to you? It's almost a good term. And to do that, I think that's where people talk about, managing from first principles. I don't think any human manages from first principles. I think we all build on existing principles, but the more you can push up to a meta level and start to approach things from a theoretical or philosophical or empirical understanding, you sort of bring these different threads together, you can start to prepare things in a way where you now have more surface area for luck to happen on, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. How do you look at from that brand profile of being really, really consumer focused and brand centric first and foremost? How do you look at Amazon? Are you on Amazon? And if so, how do you look at that from a brand standpoint?
Going back to those sort of principle approaches, when we were first considering Amazon, our thesis was that if you sell to Amazon or if you're on this platform, it's basically standardizing everything. And so if multiple people are selling on this platform, the only competitive advantage they have is price. And so you're likely to start getting discounting. And so when we looked at Amazon, one of the things we've always said with Bellroy is if we rely on discounting, we lose a proper understanding of what consumers value and when is the value relationship right. And so from day one, we said we want the vast, vast, vast majority of Bellroy sales to happen at retail price, recommended retail price, MSRP. If we're to do that and we allow lots of retailers to sell on Amazon, discounting will happen. It'll be worse than a game of whack-a-mole and you can't control what they sell for anyway, so let's not do that. So when we looked at marketplaces, we theorized that if we want to maintain price integrity, we can be the only people determining price on Amazon and all the equivalents of Amazon around the world, of which there are many. And so when we look at marketplaces, we own that relationship. Essentially, we are the ones selling on that marketplace. We are almost always selling at the price that we believe is a good trade and representation of the value, so full price. And we set up in a way that meant that was likely to be the average price that it sells for. So we do sell on marketplaces around the world. We control that experience. We have a whole team focused on many marketplaces. We believe it is a great place for customers that don't know if you've got good shipping direct, don't know all these other trust issues. So yes, we're on marketplaces. We control that experience ourselves. We don't let other retailers sell on them because then we'll get price wars that are bad for everyone and bad for all the other platforms and bad for losing the relationship with what does a customer actually value and what are they willing to pay for a product that they believe will bring this value to their life.
Quick break, and this one is personal. Your ROAS is lying to you. I know this because mine lied to me for years. When I was building Bottle Keeper, I'd see a 4x ROAS or 5x ROAS, and I think we were absolutely crushing it. When we get to the end of the month, we'd see our P&L, and we barely broke even. Now, the dashboards and the platforms, all the things would say one thing. The bank account and the P&L said something entirely different. They were disconnected. The problem wasn't ads. It wasn't marketing efficiency. It's that those output metrics like ROAS and MER, they don't account for all the stuff that crushes your margins. These are things that are shipping and fulfillment, credit card fees, Shopify fees, the marketing agency we're using, the paid media itself. That's the only thing that ROAS accounts for. But there's all these other expenses. So I built this framework that starts with net profit and works backwards to tell you exactly how to spend ad budget and how the ROAS needs to perform in order to hit your net profit target. These aren't benchmarks. It's literally your numbers and expenses based on what's happening in your business. And best of all, I'm giving these secrets away for free in a profit masterclass that I created recently. It's the exact system I used at Bottle Keeper to get to over 60 million in total sales with just 4 employees and 0 investors, ultimately to a private equity acquisition. So you can find this profit masterclass at pentane.com. But for now, let's get back to the show. Have you had to, I mean, I know the answer to this before I ask it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Have you had to spend a lot of time defending the brand on those platforms like Amazon, where you have things that mysteriously appear that look an awful lot like your product and maybe have your product name in their thing?
Absolutely. It is
Never ending.
It's never ending. And it's worse on platforms that we're not on. And that is one of the reasons that we also realized on the more premium marketplaces from Tmall and Rakuten and Amazon's, if you're not there, you'll have even more of that. If you are there and you show up in a good way, there's less of that happening, but it is still a constant game. And the larger a company gets, the more the game has to be played. And some of the games are vicious and horrible and just vile. Like there are brands that are trying to compete with you by ripping off product, doing all those things, that will even do things like buy a heap of your product, then return them all as not as advertised,
Ugh.
trying to get you delisted by the company so then they can have a window where they can outsell you. There are just horrible games that get played, and that is just part of how business needs to work. Um, we always play the higher integrity game. We don't game our reviews. We don't do any of those things. We see the reviews as incredible feedback for, okay, this one's averaging 4.7 stars. Where is it going wrong? So now we get incredible feedback from those reviews of, gosh, we might have an issue here. Gosh, that could be improved. Maybe our description wasn't accurate there. So there's so many good things to being on the platform, and every platform comes with its challenges, and you have to build a team to manage those.
Yeah. How today is the being omni-channel, do you consider from a revenue standpoint your business to be more direct to consumer, or are you really more retail? And frankly, coming from Australia, how does direct to consumer work for you, where you're obviously you sell to Australia, but that direct to consumer has to be the logistics involved in moving the product from Australia to someone in Singapore. Like, how do you manage that? Is there
So
just massive distribution network?
yeah, so one of the incredible things about the co-founders, Matt and Lena, is they come from supply chain backgrounds. So
Yeah, that's a good one.
exactly. When you set up from day one to be a lean supply chain with agile development, with, whole new theories. So, when we work with our suppliers, we have very few suppliers. We're still with our very first to this day, but we go in, we work with them, we train them in whole new theory of constraints, lean manufacture. We work to an agile development process. So we've built this incredibly dynamic supply chain from day one. Australia is a small market for us. The US is the biggest market, but we're basically anywhere you see GDP, that is where we sell. So we sell in basically all the countries of the world. We have warehouses in major locations all around the world. We can supplement with additional marketplace 3PL warehouses. So it's a completely global supply chain. Customer support, we do around the clock. We have customer support in different regions. We have all those things so that the complexity of a global supply chain it's been baked in since day one. And so I think that has made it much easier.
How are you using, assuming you're using how are you using AI today in the business?
Yeah. So we've never been a business that wants to grow quick and then retrench and downsize and do all
Yeah.
those fluctuations. We talk about taking the stairs rather than the elevator. And that's this idea of just building muscle every single day, being in control. Like someone else is in control of the elevator. It can shoot up floors and it can also go down a lot of floors. When you're taking the stairs, you're sort of moving through. And so for us, we see AI essentially as supplementing existing folks in the business rather than replacing them. So we have all sorts of teams that work in Bellroy to help others work out how they might integrate AI in a creative process or in a customer support process or other zones. Because we have so many developers in-house, Bellroy is a bespoke website. We're not on any platform, and all of our integrations and backend stuff is essentially bespoke, but moving into other programs where they make sense. So I think there's nothing radical about it. One of the other things around AI is, my brother has been concerned about some of the challenges of AI safety for a long time. He's worked with a lot of the groups there. So it's been on our radar for years and years and years. We've had a good sense of what's coming. And so it's always just been allowing teams to experiment and then sharing best practice where we can and having teams that build it in rather than knee jerk, now we're sacking entire departments and replacing them, because I think we all know this notion of the jagged edge of AI and good at some things, terrible at others. And so it's always been how can we amplify existing folks with these tools rather than replace them.
You know, we hear about this happens in headlines all the time, particularly now. And granted, that's what you get for watching the news or reading like any public media source is these like massive skews. But the freak out is that AI is just going to displace like bazillions and bazillions of people. And there are no question there are industries that are going to and already have experienced some significant displacement. But I'm using AI the exact same way. And everybody that I know and have ever talked to about this are using AI to do exactly as you described, to supplement. It's like just adding a supercharger to something that already exists. Take the blocking and tackling stuff that annoys the hell out of you throughout the day and let's automate that with this thing. And you spend time doing stuff that moves the needle.
I
That produces
suspect
more
you're
product.
talking to more sensible folks then.
Yeah, I think
Because
so.
I think in media we can certainly see that companies believe the hype, stand down entire departments, replace it with AI, and then 6 months
Yeah.
later, when so many issues around the jagged edge emerge, then they have to start quietly rehiring humans.
Yeah. I mean, we are very similar in the way that you're describing building your business on a very durable track. That's the same way that I've always built everything I've ever been in, is just build value in it, build it over time. Don't play the VC game of the ups and the downs and the race to the next thing. That's not a life I want to live. I mean, respect people that want to do that. That's great. But I also think they learn the hard way that that's maybe not as sexy as it feels or seems.
I
So
think
it's all
that's
about the
really
durability. Yeah.
I think that's really true. And, Patagonia has been a very influential brand for many businesses like ours. And we're good friends with lots of folks at Patagonia. And one of the things I heard from one of them was he'd been having a discussion with Yvonne Chouinard, the founder. And Yvonne was essentially saying, can you understand the craft of what you do? And, as a blacksmith originally, this made a lot of sense. But that notion of the craft and valuing maintenance and refinement and slow evolution, I think it just it's not as catchy as the overnight success story or the elevator to success. And so we still see so many stories of these rocket ship growths and all sorts that it like when you try and hack your way to the big result, it's not what philosophy and life valuing and vibrancy talk about. They talk about enjoying the journey, enjoying the craft of it, spending time in the detail of it, learning a space intimately until you can see texture that others miss. There's a different reward feeling you get when you're trying to work on the craft of how you go about work rather than just read the hacks and tricks to sort of bypassing it all. And I think it creates it stops you looking for the tricks, and it makes you start pay attention to every single element of it and develop a sense making apparatus and a feel for quality and a feel for long-term versus short-term and what are the compromises in every decision you make. And it creates a different flavor to the day-to-day life of trying to build something. And I think it's one that in the long term is more rewarding for most people.
Yeah, I entirely agree. It's hard. I assume this is probably, well, maybe this is unfair. It's a very American thing to like want to growth hack everything, to like want to shortcut everything, because that's all Americans talk about. Like that's all the headlines, that's all the nonsense and shit that comes out of Silicon Valley and the Y Combinators and everything is just like the hack, the this, the that, this company got to that. And so entrepreneurs here have a tendency, because that's what they read, to think that that's good and normal and the way you should go. And I spent an awful lot of time arguing the counter that it should be painful for a little bit, but in a good way. That's where all the education is. Pain is an amazing educator.
Yeah. And you're so right. When you read business success stories in Japan or in Europe, so many of them, like Japan has family companies that are over 1,000 years in one
Amazing.
family. And when you read European stories, it's often about these legacy businesses, and it's not about sprinting for the exit. It's about how can I build something that is enduring and brings value to many people, to both crew in the company as well as their children, as well as customers that get this beautiful relationship with something. And I think you're right that the general stories that get told in the US are more towards the hack your way to the $1 billion. And more of the business stories told in Europe and Japan are perhaps more around enduring and craft and legacy and things like that.
Yeah, there's a massive cultural difference. I mean, the United States is what, 300 years old total? Like, so
Well, more
yeah,
than US. You
as
know, there are
as a
incredible
construct.
generations before that had
e-
incredible cultures and all
Exactly.
sorts as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it is a different shift. But even in those stories here, you hear that overnight success. What you don't hear is the 7 years that it took for that overnight success to happen, where they bled and sweat and cried and suffered
Yep.
for all that
Yep.
time. And
Yep.
that's the
And
stuff that
it's
doesn't get talked about.
it's I think it's so valuable that you're pointing at, like, this is hard. There's hard times there, but it's also, as we know so much around research into stress and other things, if you see them as hard, if you see them as damaging, they will be. If you see that as nourishing, challenging growth opportunities, it will be. And so the way you experience the stress of those challenges is so different, just according to whether you see stress as a good thing or a bad thing. Like, if you want to build muscle stronger, you have to stress it, you have to break it down, and then it rebuilds stronger. And you know that is it. So you know a sore muscle after a workout is a good thing. And so it doesn't eat away at you and worry you. You know this is part of the process. And so I think those challenges you talk of in building a business, if you look forward to that as tests of your character, if you look forward to that as growth opportunities, you don't have to suffer that. You get to contextualize it in a way where you're like, this is what life is. Like, each time I embrace a really hard challenge and I get through it, I get to sort of level up and now take harder challenges and now take more complex things on. And so that framing, I don't think it's like, it's, if you come into it thinking it is suffering and bad for you to get to a goal, it is a bad thing for you. If you come into it knowing that that's actually, there's a way to look forward to this, there's a way to embrace this and be good with it and know that it's good for you, then it is good for you.
This is an amazing segue into kind of the next the next part of what we generally talk about. We've talked a lot about the sort of durability and having a business need to get to the point where it's in the right place at the right time for that lucky thing to happen. And maybe it's the first inflection point, maybe it's the third, whatever. We got to keep the business operating for long enough and iterating and tweaking and changing for long enough for that opportunity to take place. And the companies that don't make it, like, the company doesn't die. Like, the company doesn't get like murdered and pushed off a cliff. It's the founders that can't, for a lot of reasons, like, can't do it anymore. Financially, they can't do it. Mentally, they can't do it. Emotionally, they can't do it, whatever it is. So I'm big on talking about things to do and be able to adjust in our life in order to become more durable for those ups and downs, because there's no question it is hard. You're going to learn from it. And that's a beautiful thing. That is kind of the point. But, how can we help give context and guidance, particularly to those entrepreneurs that are maybe doing it for the first time? They're a year in, they have $1,000 left in the bank account, staring at this thing, hoping for it to take off. Like, have you always been, as you just described, as in you look at everything as a challenge and a learning opportunity? Or did you learn that over time in operating this business or another business?
I think, fundamentally our approaches to life and business are similar, right? They play to similar books. And so this is a constant evolution of us as humans, as well as our businesses within them. And so I think there have been elements that were there from early days. Very early on, Clayton Christensen was, he shared the innovators dilemma and then the innovator's solution. And in that, he talked about hungry for profit, patient for growth. If you're focused on profit, then you keep aligning around value and what does a customer value, and the growth will come. It'll come if everything's being aligned and you get a little bit of lucky tailwind. So there were elements that were always there where we were like, we want to be in control of this. So we didn't raise external funding. We just lived poor for a bunch of years and kind of sunk everything we had, mortgaged home and did all those things, because we wanted to be in control of that journey. So there were elements that have been there the whole time, but like a couple of years into starting so many businesses together, there were times when I was really struggling because I was working late. I had a new family. I was trying to be a good dad whilst also trying to juggle all these different needs. And one of the things that I realized was, even though we didn't have external funders, I had too many bosses, and too many bosses meant too many businesses all asking of something from me that I felt I'd already committed to. And I couldn't, because they were things I was new to. I was suffering planning fallacy. I was suffering this ability to understand, if I commit to this, how much work will this require to get it to a good point? What will be involved? And so elements have been there from the start, and then elements have been learned and refined as we went. So, some years in, the three founders, Matt, Lane and myself, we were all struggling a bit. I was really working hard. Their kids were a tiny bit older, but still a lot of work. I was really sunk. And so we're like, okay, we need to simplify. There's too many businesses, too many bosses. What can we close? What can we sell? Where do we bring our attention? What's really getting traction? So there's learning and evolution the whole way. And I sometimes hear it as spiraling upwards. You're still making mistakes and you're relearning the same lessons, but each time you learn it, hopefully you've now got another layer of understanding and another layer of understanding. And so I think it's forever learning. And the second you stop growing and developing as a person, like far out, I don't want to get to that point because I'm not quite sure how I deal with it. So I think parts of the lessons have been there, but when you come back to that lesson the fourth time, hopefully you're learning it at a deeper level and with more nuance and more understanding of the other bits of learning that exist in an ecosystem with that bit of learning. And so it's a development, right? We continue to evolve, and hopefully we're gaining more and more perspective as we do that each time.
So you're having a killer day. None of the shit you're working on is going the way that you want. And you're like, I got to get out of here. What do you go and do?
Surf.
Okay, that's kind of what I was going to guess.
Yeah. Surfing's. I often think of life as Venn diagrams where certain things do certain things, and when you find something that overlaps many circles in the Venn diagram, for me, that's surf. So surf is a physical pursuit. You're immersed in nature. You have a lot of still reflective time. There's a social pack at the wave. I mostly surf that I love catching up with. I'm getting my fitness in. I'm getting all it. It's just surfing ticks so many boxes that for me, it has just been a companion through all those times.
Yeah, there's something incredibly special about being in the ocean.
Yep. Really agree. Family also helps, but
yeah, I mean, there's the forcing functions to get away and out of that mental space are just so valuable. So finding whatever that is, for you listener, I live in Montana. I don't have access to surf, but I do have access to the woods, and I spend a lot of time in the woods.
Absolutely, forest bathing.
Yeah,
it's really good stuff, and even. The design office that I'm currently in our lab. Design office is a few shop fronts across, but about 11 o'clock every morning, the whole office just gets up, walks out down the coastal path, looks over the ocean, has a chat, does whatever, walks back, settles back into work. It probably takes 12 minutes, 15 minutes if we spend a bit more time out there, but just that, get away from the screen, walk, feel nature, immerse in it. And sometimes when our team's up in Melbourne office for a few more days, we do the 11 o'clock walk around the block instead. And it's like, that's in an urban area. It's all those things, but we pick a part that has trees and a bit of parkland and we go and do the same thing. And it's so important just to sort of change your focal distance and start to reflect a little and move out of the zone.
Agreed. Well, this has been super fun, Andy. How do you want people to find you, find Bellroy? We'll make sure everything gets in the show notes.
I mean, the website has links to things. We have our socials. I'm not very good at posting on socials. I'm not one of those founders. Yeah. I exist, but I don't post much. But newsletters. We're trying to share more thinking. Lena and I jump on a podcast that we record for our staff at times where we try and align just around values and principles called What Have I Missed? That's something we built just as the team grew. We wanted to share them more on what does it look like to align around philosophical things in a business setting. So there's episodes like that, but yeah.
Do you share those? Do you share those publicly?
Yeah, we do now. So
cool.
If you search Bellroy What Have I Missed podcast, you'll see it. It's only, we build it for our staff, but we tend to find that those that are it's like when you speak to founders and they've read Shoe Dog, they're like, that's more what it's like, right? Nike's journey. It's like, It's not the glossy thing. Good. It's not the glorious hindsight. It's messy. It's complex. There's all this going on. And so we tend to find people that are kind of in it, enjoy that style of conversation, even though it can feel more meandering. Thank you for hosting a podcast that is trying to share a different lens on what it looks like and not just celebrate the overnight $1 billion exit or something that feels like that's not actually the goal most of us should be going at.
Yeah, absolutely not. Awesome. Thanks again, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. Cheers.
A huge thanks to our guests today. Don't forget, this is powered by Pentame Financial and Advertising Command Center for Consumer Brands. Stop what you're doing, put your phone down, walk away from the computer screen, go outside, get some air, do something hard, push your limits, get uncomfortable, become more durable and more resilient. Create the stamina required to get through those entrepreneurial barriers. Stay in the game for as long as you can, and we will see you next time.